I'm so excited to see all of you here today. Right now, we're just over 200 people participating in this webinar, and I am so excited to have all of you here to learn about this tool that we have available for you. I think it's going to be a valuable time. Please make sure that if you have questions, to include them. I believe there's a Q&A box that's available for you to answer questions, ask your questions. Housekeeping. I'm going to just skip the housekeeping, just say thank you for joining. I don't know where you are in the state, but after days of sweltering heat and pouring rain, it is a gorgeous day. So for you to come and listen to this session, it is just tremendously appreciated. I am very pleased to introduce my colleague. I call her my colleague, Sarah Grace. We've been working together over the past year and working on some tools to provide you supports as you work with families across the state, as we are now in an environment of legalized adult use cannabis. So with that, I want to provide that time for you to hear the wonderful presentation by Sarah and our team at the Rescue Agency. And with that, Sarah, take it away. Thank you.
Thank you, Pat. And hello and welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining today. Like Pat said, we're really excited to have you here and also share all the great work that we've been doing this past year and also provide you with some information to take home with. So just for some expectations for today, you will be automatically muted while joining Zoom. But again, please use the Q&A feature or also the chat feature if you want to say hi or provide any questions as well. There will be a live Q&A session at the end of this, so we'll make sure to get to each one of your questions the best we can. If for some reason we can't get to everything, we'll follow up over email and try to answer all of your questions there. We're also recording this webinar, so in case you do need to leave or you're not able to stay for the whole thing, or you know a friend who might really like this webinar, we will be sending that out after. It'll probably take a little while to get it uploaded to the website, and then we'll send out an email to everyone who's joined. That way you can have it for your records. All right, and then moving forward, like Pat mentioned, my name is Sarah Grace, and I'm going to be your host today. I'm a senior account manager here at Rescue Agency, and I've had the pleasure of working closest with Pat and the OASAS team to provide effective youth cannabis messaging for parent audiences, which we'll dive into a little bit more today. So before we begin, let's go ahead and take a quick look at today's agenda. First, we're going to be starting with introductions for OASAS, Rescue Agency, and Health Behavior Marketing. Then we're going to be diving into Cannabis 101, covering what cannabis is and the health risks that there are for teens. Then we'll go ahead and look at the New York youth cannabis landscape, including youth cannabis use and mental health. Then we'll present the parent education and youth prevention campaign work. And we'll also be highlighting campaign materials and conversation tips. And then we're going to be taking a look at those frequently asked questions that maybe teens might be asking. And then lastly, we're going to have that wrap-up Q&A session. So make sure to drop everything you have using the Q&A feature so we can get to that later. Also, thank you everyone for introducing yourself. It's so great to see so many of you on. And again, we appreciate your time. So before we begin, we're actually going to be hosting a first little poll question. So this is our first poll, and please feel free to answer on the screen. There is no wrong answers. This is just to kind of gauge your thoughts. So how important do you think it is to educate young people about the potential risks of cannabis use? So yeah, I'll go ahead and let you answer. And then I think, all right, let's go ahead and take a look at those answers. All right. I'm really glad to know that everyone thinks everyone's on the same page. It's really important, and that's what we believe as well. So can't wait to show you the great work that we've been doing. All right. So for our teams, first, I'm going to be introducing OASAS, not that they need an introduction. Again, I'm just here to introduce the great work that they've been doing in your community. And for those of you who might not know, the New York State Office of Addiction Services and Supports oversees one of the nation's largest substance use disorder systems with approximately 1,700 prevention, treatment, and recovery programs serving over 730,000 individuals per year. This includes the direct operation of 12 addiction treatment centers where doctors, nurses, and clinical staff provide inpatient and residential services to approximately 8,000 individuals per year. So, really impressive. OASAS is the single designated state agency responsible for the coordination of state-federal relations in the area of addiction services. OASAS is here to provide, support, and oversee a data-driven continuum of addiction services delivered with equity, dignity, compassion, and respect, which we get to see in the campaign work that we've done in this past year. Ultimately, OASAS envisions that people in New York impacted by addiction will thrive and lead healthy lives. And speaking of healthy behaviors, I'll also now introduce Rescue Agency. We have spent over 20 years working to make healthy behaviors easier and more appealing. We work with government agencies and nonprofits to tackle challenges like tobacco and vaping prevention and cessation, substance misuse education and prevention, nutrition and physical activity education, and many other public health topics, with an expertise in youth cannabis education and prevention. And with that, I'd also like to introduce one of our main frameworks when it comes to youth health behavior marketing. So, based on our research, we know that teens associate weed with bonding with friends, managing stress or emotions, and also escaping from the outside world. We also know that cannabis can harm their growing brain and impact the things that they care about. What we found was teens need messaging better in scope. So this is an easy acronym just to remember how we want to make sure that we're reaching teens, connecting with them. And the first approach is to be science-based. We want to make sure that we're presenting information in a neutral and factual way. We also want to make sure that we're credible. Messages should come from near peer sources, not authority figures. We also want to keep in mind about being open. Messages must tell the whole honest story, empowering teens to make their own decisions. We also want to be pertinent. Messages must show consequences that matter to teens, like changes to their brain function and structure. And lastly, we always want to be empathetic. We want to acknowledge the challenges that youth face, ensuring that they feel understood and valued. So we use this framework when we're messaging to teens or educating parents, excuse me, like we did in this campaign. And I do highly encourage you all to do so in your own work with teens. This is a really great approach just to keep in mind. And again, we will be sharing the recording, so you'll be able to have this information at a later date. But within your own work, we highly encourage you to use the same approach. So now that we've introduced ourselves, our main framework, let's go ahead and take a deep dive on what cannabis is and what effects it has on the developing brain. So what is cannabis? Well, most of you might know that cannabis is a psychoactive drug that comes from the cannabis plant. This drug is commonly referred to as marijuana, pot, kush, and weed, and is also referenced using the emojis on screen by teens. As we all know that teens are texting and using different forms of social media. So the terms for marijuana and cannabis have also elevated to emojis and things like that. And currently more states across the United States are legalizing adult use cannabis. As of August 2023, 44 states in the US have legalized medical cannabis use, and 23 states have legalized adult use. So with legalization happening everywhere, more information is coming into the mainstream. And also, we know that today's cannabis is much stronger than in the past decades. Modern cannabis plants contain higher amounts of tetrahydrocannabinol, which is colloquially called THC. This is the main psychoactive component in the plant that gives users a sensation of feeling high, and the higher the THC content, the stronger the effects on your brain or behavior. So now that we kind of know what cannabis is overall, let's go ahead and take a look at the health risks for teens. And this is how it can also affect the teen brain, the developing brain. So research tells us that the brain doesn't fully develop until your mid-20s. And when THC is introduced into a developing brain, it can affect a teen's memory, learning, ability to think clearly, as well as problem solving. It can also lead to poor school performance that jeopardizes professional and social achievements and life satisfaction, as well as impair a teen's coordination and reaction time, and also may cause an increased risk of mental health problems like depression, anxiety, and psychosis. Research also tells us that heavy exposure to THC can reduce the production of dopamine, which is the chemical in the body that is responsible for allowing you to feel pleasure, satisfaction, and motivation. This reduction in production can make teens feel less motivated. THC can also affect the part of the brain that forms memories in the part responsible for motor function and its development. And lastly, THC can interfere with a part of the brain responsible for emotional regulation, making anxiety and stress harder to manage. And again, this is all for teen brains and developing brains. And then, so with that, not only does THC and weed affect developing brains, but it can also have an effect on a teen's mental health. The life of a teen is not easy these days. They're facing high amounts of stress and anxiety like never before. As cannabis use has been growing in popularity and normalized in the media following legalization, teens may see cannabis as a way to cope with their stress, although we know it can have the reverse effect. Some of the effects of THC on a teen's mental health includes possible risk for later psychotic disorders that appear in adulthood, along with the dependency of addiction for those who use cannabis regularly to cope with negative emotions. Like we mentioned on the previous slide, THC is shown to affect the part of the brain responsible for emotional regulation, which can make it harder for teens to manage their stress and anxiety. And lastly, using high amounts of cannabis can affect tolerance levels, making teens who use the drug less sensitive to THC, meaning that more THC is needed to fill the same effects. So I know that was a lot of information about teens and the developing brain. So let's go ahead and take a break with another poll question. So this one is just kind of a landscape of New York. What percentage of 12th graders are current cannabis users? Is it 2%, 5%, 10%, or 15%? All righty. Let's go ahead and see those answers. All right, so this was pretty tied. You were all close. The answer is D. 15% of 12th graders in New York are current cannabis users. Um, so yeah, thanks for answering. Yeah, 15% is quite a lot. So let's go ahead and take a look at the New York youth cannabis landscape. All right. Like you just answered, 15% of 12th graders are current cannabis users. And we know that cannabis use in youth is associated with those impairments in cognition, including memory, learning, and attention, increased prevalence of those psychotic, mood, and addictive disorders, and also a likelihood for developing mental health disorders. So we know that it's really important that we are educating New York's youth. And with that, we do that through our parents. That's our first line of defense. And so we went ahead and did some research with parent audiences and found some takeaways on how they approach youth cannabis use, and also kind of takeaways for us to know how to market to them. All right, so what we found with our parent audiences when we did research was the importance of cannabis conversations. Parent audiences, participants universally acknowledge the importance of talking to their kids about underage cannabis use. They associate having the conversations with other pressing and challenging topics like sexual health, race, and other harmful drugs like painkillers. So our audiences knew that this is an important conversation to have. They also expressed that maybe they didn't know how to start that conversation, but they knew that it was important. Secondly, from our research, we found that there was a need for additional guidance and tools. Participants acknowledged that it can be hard to know how to open a dialogue with their kids beyond just telling them not to use cannabis. They expressed a desire for more constructive guidance and tangible tools on how to break through the barriers they face when trying to speak to their kids about the subject. And third, we found that there was an importance around honesty and trust. Honesty and trust were highly valued among participants, especially the Spanish-speaking parents, because it allowed them to be tuned into their children's life better and make children more receptive to their parents' influence. So these were the three main takeaways that we were able to hear from our participants. And some of the quotes that we actually heard from them were, one parent said, "They need to know the effects, what it is, how much it costs, all that stuff it could be laced with. I just think you need to have an open conversation with your children about weed, whether you let them smoke or not." Another parent said, "Environment in general dictates most likely what's going to happen. You can always tell somebody something. It doesn't mean that they're always going to choose to go with what you say. You got to trust that you've done the best job you can and inform them the best that you can." So this is the general sentiment that we were hearing from parent audiences. There was the need for having the conversation, also the need for more tools, and also keeping that honesty and trust open and creating a good relationship with their teen. So this is all something that we thought of and incorporated into the campaign work that we did. And before we move on, I do got another poll for you all. So for this one, what types of messaging do youth connect with regarding cannabis education and prevention? Do youth connect with scare tactics or fear-based messaging, appealing to their sense of self, peer pressure, or addressing their reasons for use? Or we also have some options that mix up some of these answers. So go ahead and answer on the screen. Alrighty, perfect. I think we are at a consensus. Let's go ahead and see those answers. Alrighty, so most of you answered both B and D, and that is correct. Teens, again, going into messaging that is in scope, we want to make sure that we're appealing to teens' sense of self and addressing their reasons for use versus just saying, no, don't use, or using scare tactics or even peer pressure. Teens these days are complicated and they are also, again, using for different reasons. So we want to make sure that we're connecting to that. And that's something that we kept in mind for the parent messaging that we did, which I'm very much excited to show you all the work that we've done this past year. So this is the parent education and youth prevention campaign work that we did. So for our campaign background, um, we'll go ahead and take a look at who was our audience. So for this campaign, we wanted to make sure that we were identifying parents and mentors of youth. The primary age range for this audience was around 30 to 55 years old. And this includes parents and mentors of middle schoolers and high schoolers. And those adults who have tweens and teens. So we were looking at teens who are around 10 to 17 years old to make sure that we were targeting children who were in that age of influence and who might be experiencing or experimenting with weed at this time. So for the goal, we know that kids need support now more than ever. The goal of this campaign was to encourage parents to support their teens by asking what they're thinking and feeling about cannabis instead of laying down the law. For this campaign, we utilized two major strategic approaches. The first was ask, support, know. So this acronym gives parents a strategy for talking about substances and mental wellness in a mid-pandemic world so their kids can make safe and healthy decisions. Secondly, we had positive reframing by showing parents the difference between effective and ineffective conversations about cannabis. We can help them have better, more productive conversations with their own kids. So these were the two main takeaways and strategic approach that we went into this campaign for. And you'll also get to see a little bit more about the acronym in the actual flagship video, which is Ask, Support, Know. We did create this campaign in both English and in Spanish. So we'll go ahead and watch the English video first.
You're the #1 influence on your child's behavior, so it's important you know what they're thinking about cannabis. But how do you find that out? Take a deep breath and ask. First, advise. You're their role model. Talk about risks in a judgment-free way. Support. Have open conversations. They're listening to you. Be sure to listen to them. Know. They should know your expectations and that you've got their backs. And if you've ever got questions, you can ask. Advise, support, know. For more tips, head to oasas.ny.gov/prevention.
Alrighty, so that was the English version. And again, the acronym for that was advise, support, know. So that's what we did for English. For Spanish, we did adapt this into Spanish. So we did not do a one-to-one. We wanted to make sure that we provided an equitable approach that also still utilized something familiar for Spanish audiences, and also make sure that we are representing and connecting to Spanish audiences where they're at, and making sure that the translations that we are providing colloquially match as well. So let's go ahead and watch the Spanish version.
Eres la mayor influencia para tus hijos, por eso es importante que sepas lo que ellos piensan sobre la marihuana. ¿Pero cómo? Respira profundo y aconseja, háblales de los riesgos sin juzgarlos. Apoya, ten conversaciones sinceras, ellos te van a escuchar. Y averigua si ellos conocen tus expectativas. Y si alguna vez tienes dudas, respira y aconseja, apoya y averigua. Para más consejos, visita es.oasas.ny.gov/prevention.
So as you can see for this one, the acronym was for because ask wouldn't have been or we could have done a direct translation, but again, we wanted to make sure that we were providing something that made sense and again, resonated with our Spanish audiences. And then for this, I'll take a look at the campaign media plan. So this is just kind of a sneak peek of what we did do for this past year. So this campaign ran from January 29th to March 10th, and we utilized different campaign channels for this. Flagship videos were on Facebook and Instagram, targeting parents and caregivers. And then still images went live at the end of February until March 10th on Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest, and Nextdoor. And again, this was both in English and Spanish. So we were able to reach a variety of parent audiences in New York. Here's also some of the example assets that we created. We did create quite a few different materials. The one on the left here is a banner that would be redirected to the OASAS prevention page. Here's some of the still images. And then the two on the bottom were actually animated GIFs showing different ways to have the conversation. Like the one on the bottom is, "Why didn't you tell me about this?" Whereas maybe a better response might have been, "Let's talk more about this." Again, so we're always coming from that open, judgment-free approach. And so this is kind of some of the sample assets that we did within the campaign. All right, and then with that, we'll go ahead and take a look at campaign materials and conversation tips. So for the campaign toolkit materials, we did create a toolkit document that encompasses the different approaches for the campaign, while also providing tactical tools for our audiences to use and help parents have those conversations. So like we heard before, in New York, approximately 15% of 12th graders say that they're current cannabis users, which highlights the importance for parents and adults to engage in discussions about cannabis with teens. Research indicates that such conversations can significantly impact a teen's decision to use substances. This toolkit also aims to equip adults with necessary facts, science, and strategies to engage in thoughtful, productive, and effective conversations about cannabis with teens, ensuring that they're prepared for unexpected moments. So in order to provide the most useful information for parents, we included the following resources in our toolkit. We included a "What You Need to Know About Teens and Cannabis" section, which is a little bit more of a deep dive into the slides that I presented earlier. Cannabis 101, so that way parents understand what it is, what forms it takes, and just kind of like that baseline knowledge level of cannabis in general. We also provided a best practices for talking with youth. We included ways to approach, when to have the conversation to make it feel like less of a barrier to entry. For some of those examples, it was, oh, if you see someone smoking on television, or you see a commercial, or, a billboard for a dispensary, being able to bring it up more naturally and casually in conversations is one of our best practices for that. We also included the downloads and educational resources. So we were able to provide parents with data and different facts to make sure that they had everything that they needed. And we also included our sources in the toolkit. Everything in the toolkit, which my colleague Kelly just posted in the chat for you all, has been cross-referenced, and it provides all the sources of the information of where we got that information and why everything is so impactful. So that's kind of a little preview of the toolkit. I highly encourage you all to go to the link and download it. It's really helpful information. And OASAS did really great work on this. So again, feel free to go ahead and download the toolkit at the prevention page. And so in general, we highly encourage you to use this. This toolkit is for parents and mentors. Again, it's just a general approach of how you and other people who you work with, your colleagues, those in the community can learn about the risks of underage cannabis use. It also shows how to start the conversation early and talk often about making safe and healthy choices. It also discusses model healthy, safe behaviors. It provides ways to discuss to say no to cannabis. And also, we want to make sure that we're ensuring the teen in your life knows that you disapprove of underage cannabis use. Again, parents still have a huge influence over their teens, so we highly encourage you to share this out within your community. And then just so we can get another little deep dive of some of the information that we provided into the toolkit, we set up a few of these slides. That way, if you don't have time to download and look through, you're able to still get this information. So here are some of the best practices for talking with youth. First is knowing how and when to start the conversations about cannabis or even any substance with teens can be challenging. The most effective way to reach them is by having that open, honest, two-way conversation about the risks and take a deep breath and ask. So again, the first is to advise. You're their role model. Talk about risks in a judgment-free way. We want to make sure that when approaching teens that there is an open and non-judgmental environment for them by actively listening, asking open-ended questions, correcting misconceptions, and reassuring them that they can always seek guidance and support from you. We want to make sure that we are not just saying no or making them feel shame around anything. It's always supposed to be open and non-judgmental. Secondly, we want to support. By having open conversations, they know that you're listening to them. So they're listening to you, make sure to listen to them. This is a two-way street. So engage in casual conversations during everyday activities such as walks, sports events, meals, or to naturally discuss cannabis with teens by setting clear boundaries and leading by example. Lastly, is know. They should know your expectations and that you've got their backs. We want to make sure that you start the conversation early, if possible, even before the teens in your life start to even think about experimenting. When they first start asking questions and keep the conversation going as they grow. So we want to make sure that teens know where you're at and know your expectations and that they always have someone to go to and ask for any questions. All right, and then next slide, we'll go ahead and take a look on how to start the conversation. Again, we heard from parents and research that they didn't quite know how to bring it up or how to start that. So here are 4 easy ways to kind of start that conversation. The first is to keep it grounded and fact-based. Focus on the facts and discuss how cannabis use might affect them. This is a very neutral way to start the conversation because it's not you telling them no, it's just you letting them know the facts. That way they can make their own decisions. Secondly, is to help them say no. Helping your child deal with peer pressure can prevent them from using drugs. So let them know that they can say no if they're put in a situation that makes them uncomfortable. We also highly recommend coming up with a game plan again, keeping that open conversation and talking to their teen about maybe the peer pressures that they're facing. So that way you have a better way to understand and to help them. The third is to let them know that you care and that you're always there for them. By maintaining a strong, open relationship with your teen, they may be less likely to be influenced by outside sources. Creating a supportive and nurturing environment can help your child make better decisions. If teens know that they can come to you without fear of judgment, or fear of judgment or discipline, they're more likely to come to you with what they're facing and have that open conversation. And lastly, if you think a teen in your life is using cannabis, don't panic. Stay calm. Overacting may lead your teen to rebel, feel resentment, or to take greater risk. Seek to understand and empathize with their reason for using and help them explore safer and healthier alternatives. Again, just making sure that there is that non-judgment there, and then also keeping that two-way conversation by also listening to them, letting them explain, letting them let you into their life a little bit more. So that's the recap on how to start the conversation. And then we also have our final poll for today. So for this one, what types of approaches do youth connect with regarding cannabis conversations? Is it A, ongoing and frequent conversations, B, formal family meetings, listening to them versus speaking at them, telling them no without explanation? righty. I think we're ready to look at some answers. Alrighty, so majority of you put both A and C. And yes, like we just talked about, having those ongoing and frequent conversations and also listening to them versus speaking at them is really important, and it helps you connect with parents and mentors a lot more. And then with that, we'll also go into our next portion, which is the frequently asked questions portion. So again, this information is included in the toolkit and is expanded on, so that way there's a bigger, even deeper dive on these questions, but just to give you a preview and also some good takeaways on how to answer maybe some harder questions from teens, we'll go ahead and go through this section. So once you've opened up the conversation about cannabis, teens may have questions or comments that are hard to address. So let's take a look at these frequently asked comments and make sure that you're prepared to respond to them in the moment. So for the first question, if a teen says, "but it's natural," how would you respond? And for those who would like to, please feel free to write how you would respond to the webinar chat, but no worries if not. So we'll go ahead and take a look at what could be a nice way to answer this question. So if a teen to you says, "Oh, but weed is natural," you could say, "Just because it's natural, it still doesn't mean that it's safe for you to use. Your brain won't stop developing until you're in your mid-20s, and using weed now can impact your memory, stress, and anxiety." Also, thank you, Josh. Yes, I love your answer. Exactly. Even though it's natural, it can still affect your developing brain. And with this response, we acknowledge the teen's viewpoint. It is not dismissive or judgmental, and it also provides a factual basis for thoughtful discussions. So again, we're not saying, "No, you shouldn't use because I said so." It's, "No, this actually, just because it's natural, doesn't mean that it's not harmful." So yeah, thank you everyone in the chat for putting. I'd love to see these answers. All right, and then for the next FAQ, let's take a look at another question a teen might ask. So if a teen says to you, "But it's not as bad as tobacco or other drugs," how would you respond? And go ahead and pop your answers in the chat if you'd like to. I'll give everybody maybe a minute, a couple of seconds or so. "But it's not as bad as tobacco or other drugs," how would you respond? Whitney, I see your answer. Thank you for answering. Jamie, Solly, thank you so much. All right, so let's take a look at an example answer that you can respond with. So if a teen says, "But it's not as bad as tobacco or other drugs," you can say, "As your brain develops, it's expertly fine-tuning its connections, and many substances, including cannabis, can disrupt the brain's developmental process." This response addresses the concerns raised by the teen. It uses empathy and provides constructive information. It's also crucial to respond with respect, factual information, and an open mind to promote understanding and informed decision making. So with this answer, many substances, and like some of you said before, all substances can be bad. So many substances, including cannabis, can disrupt your brain's developmental process. Again, because their brains are still developing until their mid-20s, we want to make sure that we're educating our teens in that respectful, factual way and letting them know that it can still affect their brain negatively. Also, thanks everyone for adding these in the chat. I love to see it. Alrighty. And then, so we're actually coming to a close on the presentation portion of this webinar. I did want to share some educational resources. Please feel free to check out the OASAS prevention page. There's also the New York State Office of Cannabis Management. So these are also included in the toolkit links that my colleague Kelly posted in the chat before, and the toolkit itself. So feel free to use those websites for information. And if you do have any other questions, please feel free to contact the Office of Addiction Services and Support at their prevention email. Also, if you have any questions in general for me, I can drop my email in the chat as well. That way you can reach out and I'd be happy to answer anything that you might have. And then with that, we'll go ahead and open up the floor for the Q&A portion. Let me just take a quick moment to look through this chat. Let's see. And again, thank you so much for joining and adding in all of these questions. Let's see. Pat, were you going to say something really quick?
No, I'm just kind of looking at the questions, and the one that just popped up was New York State Cannabis Management
Mhm.
doesn't seem a helpful resource, more like promoting cannabis. Actually, I will respectfully disagree with you. Their role is to regulate, legalize adult use in medical cannabis. The information that they do provide is useful. It provides information regarding a lot of information regarding the legalization, what is allowed, what isn't allowed in terms of the marketplace. It also provides us information, and we can provide all of you information regarding enforcement of unlicensed brick and mortar cannabis outlets that we are all seeing throughout the state, through smoke shops and convenience stores and bodegas. So I asked the person who wrote that to take another look and look at it through a different lens. We're the agency that addresses prevention, and they're providing information from the framework of being the regulator of the legalized market.
Thank you, Pat. I can go ahead and answer. I see a question from Tracy. This is a complicated question, but something that I have been handling with parents. What if a teen receives guidance from a professional to use medical marijuana for their anxiety or PTSD? This is a great question. I have heard this before from parents in general. And obviously, if for some reason a teen and a parent have received permission from a licensed medical professional, and this medical professional is advising them to use cannabis for anxiety or PTSD along with a medical marijuana card, that is a decision that is up to the medical professional and the parents in that situation. I do know that there have been parents in the past who might see cannabis as a way to help with anxiety and PTSD, and then therefore give it to their children without that medical professional's opinion. So when it's outside of medical professional, obviously we do not condone that. Parents should always make sure that they're kind of communicating with their medical professionals. And again, just because it seems like it can help on the surface, it can make stress and anxiety worse, and make those teens more dependent. So I understand how hard that is when it comes to if it is a medical professional. That's kind of up to them and the parent for that kind of situation. And then let's see. Should the conversation be? Oh, go ahead.
Go
Pat.
ahead. No, go ahead, Sarah.
Okay, I was just going through the questions. Should a conversation be approached differently if the parent mentor believes their teen falls into that 15% current user category? That is a good question. I definitely think that the conversation should be approached delicately, and also again, like, openly and with that non-judgment. I think it was for number 4, kind of on those how to start the conversation. If you do believe that maybe the teen or the teen in your life may be using cannabis, again, try to understand maybe their reasons for use, help provide them with other healthier options on how to manage that stress or for whatever reasons they're using it. Again, if it's for peer pressure reasons or anything like that, try to get to the root of it. So I would still say that all the tools in the toolkit are applicable to this, but we just want to make sure that we are approaching it delicately and openly, especially for those who might fall into that 15% user category.
I see another question to move on as it relates to the Office of Cannabis Management and Enforcement of some of the illegal shops. We had a presentation about 2 weeks ago from the Office of Cannabis Management. They recently, within the state budget, had received extensive ability to enforce these illegal shops, and they have also been provided, the legislation provided an opportunity to work with local officials as it relates to the enforcement of locking, putting padlocks on some of these locations. And I will tell you, about a week or so ago, I was in New York City, and I was very pleased to see numerous illegal shops actually having padlocks and cease and desist orders from New York City Police Department hanging in their window. So it took a while, and there were some adjustments that needed to be made with the state law. However, those adjustments have been made, and the Office of Cannabis Management is actively enforcing the state law, working with local partners. We will put in, I see one of my colleagues, Lauren Sassone, if you could also put in the Office of Cannabis Management into the chat. They have a form. I encourage you, if there are illegal shops within your community, that they that you send that information to the Office of Cannabis Management. And again, this is going to be a process. It's not going to be overnight that they go and put padlocks on doors, but the work is happening. And go ahead, Sarah, do you want to take some of the other, or read off some of the other questions we have?
Yeah, of course. So I saw that we had a question earlier about the parent takeaways on youth cannabis use. There was a question about how many participants or if any research was done after COVID-19, and are all the counties represented in participation? So for this one, that is actually accumulation of different parent cannabis groups and mentor cannabis groups that we've conducted across the United States. So that also includes data outside of New York. But what we found is that parents, regardless of what state they are in, had very similar overlaps in approaches and thoughts about cannabis themselves. And some of the research was done after COVID-19. We conducted a few English and Spanish focus groups after COVID-19 because we knew that cannabis had a big effect on teens' mental health and also reasons for use. So for that, it's accumulation of a few different years of data that we've done. I think the data started in 2016 and went up until 2021. I think that was the most recent data that recent focus groups that we've conducted with parents. Again, that was a little bit of a accumulation of multiple groups, ranging from different sizes of participants. And then I think this was Barbara's question, what data are you using for that previous poll? That was for poll question number 3, the types of messaging that youth connect with regarding cannabis education and prevention. That is also from our own personal data. So Rescue has conducted also teen cannabis work across different states throughout the United States. And again, most teens also have a similar approach of wanting to make sure that they are addressing their reasons for use and meeting them where they're at was a universal takeaway that we've seen with teen audiences, regardless of location. And Barbara, I can always share the greater reports out with you as well for some of those, some of the teen data there. And then let's see. Okay, perfect. Barbara, do you have, or excuse me, Pat, did you have another question you wanted to do? Or
I did have a question. I really want to address one of the questions that came in earlier in just clarify something for everyone. And this is not Pat talking. This is information that has been provided to states as in terms of cannabis and fentanyl. These are things that have been said by the head of the Drug Enforcement Agency. This is information that has come through the health department, through our commissioners, who's a physician, has said this publicly. We are not seeing, the market is not seeing fentanyl in cannabis right now. I'm saying right now because I know tomorrow's another day. But right now, you're not seeing fentanyl in cannabis. What we are seeing, and this again, from the federal perspective, from the state perspective, is when there are overdose deaths, what they're finding is polysubstance use. So yes, the person may have cannabis in their system, but they're also finding other substances within a person's toxicologies. So as I said, at this point, this is something that has been was presented recently at the CADCA Nat Leadership Forum. I just attended a meeting with leadership from SAMHSA. We're not seeing it in the market right now. And I just wanted to make that clear because numerous times I've heard about fentanyl being in cannabis, and we are not seeing that.
I also see a question in the chat from Jamie. In many surveys with teens, they state that parents know that they use. Some say that parents buy it for them and or even use with them. How would you handle this? Re-educate the parents? That is a great question. And yes, we would focus on re-educating the parents. Again, for this campaign, we wanted to make sure that parents had all the information that they needed on teens developing brains, but also their mental health. This particular instance, though, is also arising in the state of Maine. We just did research with them, and a lot of parents there said that they felt that cannabis does help their teens with anxiety and even use with them, buy it for them. So when that happens, we want to make sure that parents are understanding that there is a very real risk of underage cannabis use, and also appealing to the parents' reasons for sharing with their teens. And in the state of Maine's case, it's about mental health. We want to make sure that parents know that cannabis can affect their teens' mental health and have a negative impact on that. So yeah, just creating baseline education, making sure parent audiences are seeing those real risk factors. So you were right on there, Jamie. Yeah, re-educating the parents. And then let's see. I also know that we had a good amount of questions even before the webinar as well. So let me see. Oh, I can go ahead and answer. What are the 6 states that don't have adult cannabis legalization? I need to look up the full list. I know off the top of my head, I know Idaho, Wyoming, Kansas, and South Carolina are fully illegal, like not even CBD.
Utah.
Oh, in Utah, thank you. So yeah, I need to look up the list, but I know off the top of my head, those are some of the states that adult cannabis is not legal whatsoever.
And just to add to that, just so everyone knows, all of our contiguous states in New York State, except for Pennsylvania, have legalized cannabis. And I will, and from what I understand, Pennsylvania's on its way. Thank you so much. I see there was a Narcan training and they're starting, DEA said they were starting to see cannabis sprayed with fentanyl. I will follow up with our colleagues at DEA. Actually, I'll pop an email right now while we're still on and see if this is new information. So I thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. I also see a question from Hillary. What are harmful effects on adults? I'm assuming this is for cannabis. In general, the science on cannabis is always developing. I think right now there's not a lot of long-term effects right now that we know of about cannabis. In general, similar to it can happen to teens as well. We talked about the tolerance of THC. The more that you use cannabis, including adults, that tolerance can increase, meaning that that adult would need more and more THC to feel the same effects. And so there can be a cannabis dependency there as well. Similar to teens, if adults are using to manage their stress and anxiety and cope, that is seen as a little bit more of a dependency there. Again, and it can just make things harder to manage. So typically for adults, you risk of your THC tolerance increasing, meaning you need more and more, and also affecting your own mental health there. All right, let's see. And then, Pat, I know we had some questions even before the webinar, so I wanted to make sure that we did answer those. Someone asked if this qualifies for the OASAS learning credits. Did this webinar qualify for that?
We will have to get back to you on that. We had not done that, but I will have to have that reviewed by our learning and development, and we'll send a notice out to everyone.
Perfect. And then someone asked, can this workshop be offered to parents? This workshop can be offered to parents. Again, like the toolkit, we do go over Cannabis 101, kind of general cannabis information to help educate those parents, providing our reasoning, and then also kind of this end section here that we did with the Q&A. And we can always like build it longer as well, in case any of you would also like to share out this webinar with any parents that you know. And then let's see. All right, I'm just looking through these questions.
Other questions?
We did get a question prior to the chat that said, what is the best way to help teens understand the danger of products that contain Delta 8, Delta 10, and other products that don't contain THC but are also dangerous? Thank you for whoever submitted this. Delta 8 and Delta 10 is obviously a huge up and coming issue. And similar to cannabis, helping teens understand the health effects for those substances in particular is very similar to cannabis. Essentially, it's still affecting their developing brain. When it comes to Delta 8 and Delta 10, though, because it is a synthetically created substance, there is, and it's also unregulated, there is a chance that these Delta 8 and Delta 10 products can also contain other harmful chemicals. So for the case of Delta 8 and Delta 10, it is definitely not natural, and it can contain different substances. I know in certain states, I actually, I have some Delta 8 data, I think on New York as well. Sometimes they have found like household cleaners in these products. It's just not regulated, and it's created very synthetically. And so there is the regular THC health effects when it comes to it, or cannabinoid when it comes to Delta 8 and Delta 10, meaning it can affect teens' brains, but there's also the added health risk of just not knowing what is in it, what kind of chemicals or anything like that. Let's see. Also, aren't those deltas change and worsen once ingested, changing its potency like in the edibles? So we have a question from Margie. When it comes to Delta 8, I'm not sure if it worsens when it's ingested versus consumed in other ways. But we do know that because it is unregulated and synthetic, typically Delta 8 and 10 edibles will have a huge quantity of synthetic THC in it. Typically, a normal edible might have, 5 milligrams or, a certain regulated amount, whereas Delta 8 and 10 products can contain up to like 100 milligrams. So again, it's very unregulated. The edibles typically are very potent. So I'm not sure if it changes once ingested, but those unregulated items can be very, very potent, which is something to be cautious of as well. From an anonymous attendee, any THCA data, I will need to look into that. I'm personally more familiar with Delta 8 and 10, but I can look into other data and share out with you all if I have anything on that. And let's see.
Are there other questions that we may have missed?
Let's see.
Unfortunately, Rich Lucy's not available. We will have to get back to you. I do have an email into the DEA's Community Outreach and Prevention Support Team. What we can do is make sure that we have, get some information out and post the Q&A that came in before. We can get some answers for you and post that with the webinar.
And then let's see. Oh yeah, someone asked about social media sites for TikTok and Instagram. When it comes to TikTok and Instagram, I don't know of any. I would have to look up certain creators that are providing information. Um, Rescue does have TikTok and Instagram for different cannabis campaigns that we have done across the United States that do have helpful information when it comes to parents. We've also done teen campaigns as well. So I can share those out as well in an email. I can send that to Pat and she can share that out with everybody else. But as in terms of individual creators, I don't know of any on the top of my head. So I would have to get back to you on that. And then we also got some pre-webinar questions about, how can we get some parents on board? And also, how would we share out this toolkit to parent groups and parent organizations? Just in general about getting parents on board. Similar to teens, we also want to make sure that we are approaching parents non-judgmentally. Sometimes parents, and especially if they use cannabis themselves, can feel a little insecure about talking to their kids about cannabis or receiving information about youth cannabis information. And so similar to our teens, we want to make sure that we're meeting parents where they're at in a non-judgmental way. And it's more of a like, hey, we have this really great information that we'd love to share with you. And again, we're not throughout the campaign and in most of our cannabis work, we're never condemning cannabis. It's more about protecting. We're always pro-brain. We're protecting teens' brains. So we never want to demonize cannabis as that shuts down audiences, both teen and parents. And so when approaching parents who maybe do use cannabis or who just want to learn more and maybe haven't had the chance to do so yet, just approaching them in a very open way and saying, hey, here's the data that we have. We'd love to share it with you. And again, this is more about educating for teens as well, right? This is about underage cannabis use, not adult cannabis use. And then in terms of sharing it out with your other partner coalitions and things like that, the toolkit is available virtually. Pat, I know there's also some you've printed copies in the past. People can download these and print them. So I would just share them out through bulletins, connect with the school boards or any whoever's in charge of the parent groups and say, this is a free resource for you to use. We'd just love to share this information. And then also you're creating really nice community relations as well by providing that free useful information there.
I see a question about in the chat. I am a mental health counselor providing outreach and substance use screening. How do we approach cannabis use in schools settings, being that it's so normalized within peer groups? I think that we really provide education and factual information for youth. We are also hoping that we can utilize such tools as Teen Intervene and doing a screening and brief intervention for youth that are using substances. I will tell you, as part of our overall strategy in working with all of you, we are in the process of working with the folks at the Stanford Reach Lab at the Stanford School of Adolescent Medicine to provide additional supports and information to all of you on their Smart Talk Cannabis Toolkit. They also have a tool on their website, Healthy Futures Alternatives to Suspension and Safety First, which is a curriculum-based program that can be dropped into science classes and health classes. So again, we will get this information out. This is, I know it's taken some time. Somebody said, what's taken some time with this? We have processes and we've been trying to move as quickly as we can. We really felt it was important to work with vendors, including the rescue agency, and also the folks at the Stanford Reach Lab, because they've had experience working with individuals in states that have legalized long before we have. We are keeping our finger on the pulse to look at continually monitor data, to look at what's happening not only with teens, but with young adults. I recently attended a conference with my colleagues who are in the similar, who are my counterparts in other states. And those states that have legalized for some time, the biggest uptick they have seen in terms of use has been with young adults. So we are really looking at how we protect our teens when they're teens, but also looking at how we reach young adults, college students, young people who are out there in the working world who are under the age of 21. How do we make sure that we reach them? How do we reach, and beyond 21, how do we reach those young people whose brains are still developing? So again, these are things that we are looking at and making sure. I understand a lot of the concerns. I hear from all of you about them, but what we're trying to do in our environment is to make sure that we get the information that they need, and do so effectively and follow the science. So that is definitely something that we are doing on our part. There's some other questions that that have been asked pre-seminar, and it says sensation programs that are available to youth under the age of 21. Is that a sense? I'm assuming that's about tobacco, possibly, and tobacco cessation work, tobacco prevention work happens with the Department of Health. We have been speaking with the Department of Health, looking to develop some guidance documents for school districts and prevention providers on vaping, not only vaping tobacco, but vaping THC. And so those are things that are in the works, but we are having those conversations. Will you be offering teen intervene training? Again, I will say that we've got training out there, and lots of training. We've just gone through a training of trainers for Teen Intervene and could have continuous training. Please, we have our own. I'm very excited. We have our own learning and development page for prevention services, and please, again, look at those opportunities for getting training. Johnny's Ambassadors has free. I can't speak. Someone wrote Johnny's Ambassadors has free curriculums. I can't speak to their curriculum. I have not had a chance to review it, but of course we will look at all curriculum. And see, how it follows the science. I will tell you that the Reach Lab materials are free to use. They're on Canva, so that means that you can make adjustments to make the graphics look like the students and the families that you work with. We will also put their link in. It's evidence informed based on their evidence-based vaping curriculum. So I will put that in, and again, it's a free tool to use, and I know some of you have already started to use it, so I'll put the link in for that.
Mhm. And then we also got a question from the pre-webinar about how to better educate parents on the effects of cannabis on their teens. In general, if you are reaching out to any parents for your own messaging, and if you're not using the toolkit, in general, I would always recommend keeping the messaging a little bit more simple. So maybe relying on a key fact when it comes to mental health. Um, teens who use cannabis regularly are up to 2 times more likely to develop depression later on. So if you're approaching parents and you're trying to educate them on a certain effect, like mental health, I would recommend just kind of repeating that fact in different ways, making sure that whatever fact that you're going with is simple. That way it's easier for them to remember, digest it. It's not too much information, and then always link out for more and always link them to more information if they would like to learn. And again, in that case, you can use the toolkit there as well. Righty. And then Pat, how are we feeling about time?
Oh, it's 3:08, so we got some time. So we purposely made this a little more than an hour so we could answer your questions, but also if we were giving you an extra 15, 20 minutes in your day, I'm sure none of you would complain.
And then I know there was a question early on about, are we facing big cannabis as we have faced big pharma and big tobacco as legalization grows? I feel like that's a very interesting question. In general, we do see, the cannabis, now that cannabis is being legalized in many states and it's becoming more normalized in our culture. It's really interesting because we have all of these new products, things out there which can lead to misinformation to teens. Again, if parents or mentors are not talking to teens about cannabis, they're probably going to be influenced by, big cannabis, the media, other things like that. And cannabis use is becoming so much more normalized. So I feel like that is a really interesting question. In general, we're just seeing a rise in it, which means we need to educate parents and teens. The sooner, the better. Pat, I don't know if you had any thoughts about, if we're facing big cannabis like we are big tobacco.
It's always there's always going to be a lobby here in terms of an industry coming in and trying to deliver services. What I will tell you is that from the perspective of our agency and working together with our Office of Cannabis Management, we are going to work together. We are working together. I'm not going to. We are working together to make sure that there is information to not only youth, but also individuals. You will find information around legalized markets and where it's that legalized market and where there are certain requirements. I will tell you because we reviewed many of the requirements related to the sale of cannabis. We had an opportunity here at OASAS to have our medical director review it, have our counsel's office review some of the to review the requirements, and our division of prevention and treatment review some of the requirements as it related to labeling, to make sure that the labeling was appropriate when it says that the age is 21, to make sure that there was some indication that it was had been tested, the cannabis that is sold in legal settings is tested, to make sure all of that is people are made aware of that. And that if people are going to use cannabis, it is legal, that they do it from a legal market. As I say to people, I said, you wouldn't, I shouldn't say you wouldn't, but chances are you're not buying alcohol from the still in the woods, or you're buying something that's legal and tested. But they're, I that's what I have to say about that. We're working together to make sure we keep people safe, especially young people.
And then I saw Marie saying that it would be very useful to share this information with school nurses in general. So yeah, Marie and anybody else on this line, this toolkit can be used by any adult role model, and we do highly recommend it if you're able to share this out again with the school boards, with the school nurses. It's just a really great way to get cannabis knowledge in a digestible manner. It's not too long. So adult role models will be able to educate themselves and just have that baseline cannabis knowledge in case teens do have questions or things like that. So the toolkit can be used for both parents and adult role models. And then Pat, we did get some questions about just resources in general, like resources for parents who are currently having substance use disorder. And then also curriculum for elementary, preteen, and adolescent age groups. So I wasn't sure if, I know the Stanford Reach Lab has really great curriculum and material. Was there anything else any other resources that you might have?
Let me reach back to my team here in terms of resources for other substances, for cannabis, and we'll talk. It might take a little while. We're doing some making some adjustments to our pages on of our website. But again, what we can do is look at what type of resources that we can put together. We do have a resource page for those of you who are educators. Actually, everyone has access to the page. We do have within our prevention webpage a link to resources for educators, and that will provide not only a resource around different resources, different guidance documents, but also provides some information regarding resources, evidence-based practices. All of those pieces are there. Prevention agencies that this information, I'm looking at some of the questions that were in the Q&A box. That's what I'm doing. Do people know about prevention agencies that get information to kids already? There seems to be very little knowledge about this profession that is working hard with teens. We are really working, and this is something that we have been, we're going to be working on not only in New York State, but actually across the nation and also I know that this is a key piece of the work that CSAP, Center for Substance, actually CSUP, Center for Substance Use Prevention, is really looking at how to really get information out and talk about, talk about our profession, have people learn about the prevention field and what services prevention offers. Are there any opioid-based EBP curriculums that state recommends? We have a list of evidence-based programs. Those evidence-based programs you can find on, and I'm going to ask, I hope one of my team is on the list and can post within the chat the EBP, the link to the EBP list registry here. This is always a challenge when about substance-specific curriculum. And we recognize that there are curriculums that are particular about cannabis and other substances. But there are also tremendous curriculum that are part of our registry that talks not about a specific drugs, but talks about substance use in a comprehensive, holistic way, that talks about brain development, that talks about the issues around substance use and not just one substance. We will continue at this agency to do our work, to talk about fentanyl and opioids and alcohol. If you look at the data that relates to youth and uses of substances, actually the entire population, we always need to think about alcohol too. And I will say that all the time, because that is one of the first substances we see young people delve into is alcohol. The perception of harm on cannabis, I think there's a lot of data out there. If you look at the NISTA data, if you look at the YRBS data, the perception of harm has gone down. And so we are constantly looking for you to be our partners in the education of young people, in the education of communities, of families, to talk about making sure that young people delay initiation and how to handle substance misuse across from youth to older adults. We want to make sure that we're reaching people before their substance use becomes an issue where they need treatment.
Pat, I'll also hop in there, echoing everything that you said. Also, I know that SAMHSA has some national data as well. I'm dropping one of their pamphlets here in the chat. In general, we have seen, even within our own research, that the risk around teens' perception of risk is definitely declining. Even parents as well. People feel that cannabis isn't as risky as a behavior as it really is. So it's definitely something that we're seeing a decline in. Yeah, echoing everything that Pat said, making sure that we're educating parents and teens to delay that initiation of use is definitely very important.
And I'm just going to add one other note to this. There is a link in the chat for our prevention webpage. Also, link in the chat about our evidence-based practices. It really has been a delight working with our team at Rescue Agency. I will remind all of you that it was about a year ago that we had 3 webinars, 3 of them with the team from the Stanford Reach Lab, and those are available on our Learning and Development page. And they were taped and have a lot of information, as this is going to be taped and once available to upload, another resource for you on our Learning Development page. So we want to make as much information to you, available to you. Make sure that you have the information, and the pamphlet is on our website and can be a little tip. I wish I could show it to you, but that would be kind of disruptive of me. One of the things that we've done is to, and we will put it, make it available to all of you. We've developed a flyer that has some of the graphics design piece that you saw earlier with the Ask campaign and the toolkit, and it's got the QR code. So we will make that also available to you. So you can make, instead of printing the whole booklet, which we would love for you to do, but we know that everybody has limited resources. We have a flyer with a QR code, and that will get you can make copies of that. And that is much easier than trying to print out a whole booklet. And I will take myself off a video, and so I can get it, so I can hopefully show it to you.
Thank you, Pat. And then also, yeah, I did want to mention that like the campaign, the toolkit is available in Spanish as well. So for any Spanish speaking audiences or, yeah, parent groups, school boards, things like that, please feel free to share out with Spanish language audiences as well. And then let's see. Oh, there you are, Pat.
So I don't know if you can see this. It's kind of hard to see, but we made I think I have to take myself off of blur. Then you're going to see my messy office, folks. I'm sorry. You can probably see it. We have a flyer that we'll make available to you, and it has a QR code. And if you want to make single sheet, We have it available in English and in Spanish. And you can download, you can use the QR code. One of the great ways we've used this is put it like in a little plastic frame at a tabling event, and people can QR code and get the toolkit.
Well, thank you so
And-
much, everyone. Oh, go ahead, Pat.
Yep. Thank you, everybody. Again, we appreciate the time you've taken today. It's a gorgeous day. We thank you so much for being here today. We will make sure all of our resources are available to you, and we will also do a, I believe we're going to get a evaluation out to you also. So thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you for your support, and we look forward to our continued work.
Thank you, everyone. Really appreciate it. Have a great day.